Everybody, I have a little addition to the note, not the note, the lecture on the ancient Assyrians. As most professors, myself included, I'm trying to always be studying and learning and growing. And since I recorded the lecture that you guys already watched on had the ancient Assyrians, the Persians, the Babylonians, and the Hebrews, and so forth, um, I came across some more information on the ancient Assyrians, a very important part of them. And most of what we talked about in this class is the power of the Assyrian Empire, the extraordinary military the Assyrians had, and tragically, an aspect of the empire building is the ferocious nature and the barbarity of the Assyrian Empire in many ways. But like all peoples, the Assyrians were complex, and I would be missing something if I did not mention a debt we owed to them, despite the red clawed version of the empire and the terrible atrocities they committed in amassing that massive ancient Near Eastern empire. But they also left some remarkable things to the world culture, and I'm going to talk about them in this short lecture. So the good news is it'll be a short lecture. And the reason I'm adding to it is because we'll be on the exam, so it's important. So don't skip this short little lecture. so uh, let me shrink down myself to right size, and we'll get into a short little mini lecture on one of the world's great treasures, and that would be the Library of Ashurbanipal. Ashurbanipal, there we go. Ashurbanipal was one of the last of the Assyrian kings and the Assyrian Empire that had been crafted over so many centuries by his forebears, would crumble not long after his death. Although when he died, it was still seemingly in good shape, but it collapsed catastrophically not long after his death. But in any case, that's not our focus right now. But when he was alive, they still were at the height, in many ways, of their great power. And he's going to do something that's going to profoundly impact us and even, in a sense, affect you guys in class right now. And that is, for whatever reason, but he had a tremendous interest in Mesopotamian culture and preserving that culture. And thank goodness for that. And you see the subtext right there. You can see that Ashurbanipal's library. And beneath that, you'll see a serious legacy of the collective Mesopotamian thought reaching down millennia to today. And what you're looking at in front of you is a fragment from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is one of the requirements you guys are reading about. You guys can read about a Gilgamesh excerpt for class actually today. And that Epic of Gilgamesh, you guys read the excerpt, is fascinating, and it is one of the masterpieces of world literature. And it also shows you the universality of the human condition, as Gilgamesh is wrestling with something that all of us, myself, all of us, and you guys, we all wrestle with, which is when we're born, our body clock is ticking, and most of us here on Earth are lucky to get into our 70s or 80s, maybe into our 90s if we're very healthy and fortunate and a lot goes right for us. But of course, a lot of human beings never get there. And Gilgamesh in this great epic is worried about that too. He's like, I would prefer not to get old like that and go out someday, which is the destiny of all humanity. And Gilgamesh is like, is there a way out? Is there a third door, a door I can find to get out of this condition? Because I prefer not to go that way. And the excerpt you guys read in class is about that very topic. He hears that this one person has found a way out, found a way out to get out of this trap of humanity. And Gilgamesh is like, yes, please. How do I get out? Now, how do we know that ancient story? It's one of the oldest of all I guess epics would be the right, yeah, one of the oldest of all recorded epics. Now, there's others too, but it's one of the oldest. Um, and so, how do we have that? That epic is more than 4,000 years old. So, how do we have that? As you guys know, much from the ancient world is sadly lost and perhaps ever will be. But we have that, most of it, not all, but most of it. So how is that possible? And that is because the great library, Ashurnasirpal, one of the last of the great Assyrian, actually the last of the great Assyrian kings, had a tremendous interest in preserving literature of all kinds during his reign. Took great pride in that. And you see a quote from him says, I, Ashurbanipal, king of the universe. By the way, gives you a little idea of this guy's ego. I don't know about you guys, but he's also king of the universe. Now, the Assyrian Empire was very powerful during his reign, so he's not wrong to say, I'm a great king. Again, whether great is actually good, I'll leave that to you guys to decide, because he had a reputation for terrible brutality as well. But in any case, on whom the gods have bestowed intelligence, who has acquired penetrating acumen. Acumen is high level in education. For the most recondite details of scholarly erudition, again, erudition is high level education. None of my predecessors have any comprehension of such matters. Translation, he's like, look, I'm highly educated. I have a passion for it. I have a love for it. All the kings lived before me didn't understand it, didn't get it. I do. And so he said, I made this great library here in Nineveh, um, and it will sustain my name. And by the way, yeah, he had a massive ego, but he's not wrong. That's why we're talking about it right now. So you can see the years he's reigned. You don't need to write that down. You notice it's not highlighted for you guys. So I'm not so concerned with that. But 669 to 631 is the years. Look at my own thing. I maybe have a little typo there because he reigned his entire life. I think when he was a kid, he would not have reigned. Don't worry about that. That's something I'm going to fix later. Any case, um, his capital city of Nineveh, and among many things about him, I do want you to know one briefly, which I mentioned already. And give me a second here. See if I can do this. No, no, that's all right. Oh, here we go. That's what I'm looking for. Sorry, guys. Well, that's not going to work, and that's fine. Let's try one more time here. If I can see if I can do what I want to do. There we go. That's what you guys need. Sorry for that delay and me kind of mumbling in the background. uh, this software I'm using has some new updates, which, by the way, look nice. I've not figured out how to use all of them clearly. But I want you guys to know that. So he's one of the last of the great kings, and again, I'll highlight that for you guys too. Presided over Typhus power, capital in Nineveh. He also has a reputation, and I already talked about this in the previous video, so I'm not really going to him in detail on this, but he has a reputation for very publicly proclaiming his brutality against his enemies. I assume, obviously, to terrorize them, intimidate them, because very publicly. Oftentimes, as you guys know, the great villains in history, oftentimes they try to hide at least the worst of it. They like the intimidation factor, but oftentimes they hide the worst of their terrible atrocities, brutality. They often try to hide it. That's not King Ashurnasirpal. He's very public. We have many bas reliefs, these massive wall art full of the worst. And you guys saw some of that before, so I'm not going to get into all that. The skinning alive, the beheading, the impaling, hooks in the nose, and on and on and on. But that's not the point we're at. I just want you to know he was one of the worst of the Syrian kings as far as publicizing that. Okay, but let's get back to the focus of what we're doing here. Despite obviously the ferocious nature of treatment of his enemies, he obviously has this great love of learning and collecting scholars around him and scouring the Mesopotamian world for classics in that time period. And the one I want you guys to know, which I've mentioned already, is the Epic of Gilgamesh. And the reason we have the Epic of Gilgamesh is in many ways because of King Ashurnasirpal. There's some other copies as well too, but the largest intact comes from his library. This massive library he constructed, actually had a couple of them, but sitting scholars and searching all the Mesopotamian world, collecting them from Babylon and all the farthest reaches of the Assyrian Empire, collecting these masterpieces. Now, in today's idea would be books, but they didn't have books per se back then, but they have clay tablets. Although, as I mentioned in previous lectures, the clay tablet does have some upsides to it. Now, they're heavy, not easy to transport. That's not so good. That's why we don't use them anymore. But the longevity of them, if they're stored properly, is outstanding. And again, so we owe, in many ways, some of these earlier classics of world literature to this form of recording the human experience, in this case, cuneiform, ancient Akkadian oftentimes on these cuneiform clay tablets and then drying them. So That library was destroyed in 612 BC, but fortunately, thank God, not completely destroyed. The building collapsed around it, but in the 1840s, it was rediscovered by archaeologists working in the former Assyrian Empire, and they came across it. Now, of course, many of these clay cuneiform tablets have been smashed, uh, but a significant number of them were intact or in the worst jigsaw puzzle ever, but able to be put back together. And as they put back together, more and more and more of this ancient world comes to light. This extraordinary collection of all kinds of things, history and religious ideas and communication, letters, philosophy, science, botany, you name it, is part of this massive library that King Nasrpal had collected for him. That was eventually, most of it was taken in the 1840s, and it's taken all the way to England, in this case, London. If you guys are ever in London, among many amazing things to see in London, you guys have to get to the British Museum. It's an outstanding collection of Assyrian bas reliefs, those magnificent, terrifying, wall-sized pieces of artwork showing the Assyrian kings in all their glory, all their terrifying military capability, these lion hunts to be involved in, and sadly, as you know, and graphically treatment of the conquered peoples and so forth. But along with that, in the British Library, they also have the world's largest collection from King Ashurbanipal's personal royal library. Has ended up in the British Museum, and you can see some of it right here. That's some of the tablets right there. Epic Gilgamesh will be the most famous of all these, but there's many other pieces of literature of all different kinds there as well. Take a minute and make sure you guys write down what you guys see there. It's highlighted. Although the library was destroyed in 612 BC, its reputation likely, and again, this is far enough back in time, we can't say for sure, scholars don't know for sure, but likely influenced later great libraries, which are also incredibly important. For example, the great libraries in Alexandria and other places that would come generations later. And we owe a lot to those libraries of recording, preserving, and transmitting the human experience. But the first of these that we're aware of these great kind of universal libraries of thought, would be King Ashurbanipal's there in the Assyrian Empire there in Nineveh. So, and what has that library yielded? As all those things I mentioned, but this priceless trove of Mesopotamian thought. It continues to be studied even now. The British Library has not finished translating, deciphering, and probably frankly even reassembling all those broken clay tablets from King Ashurbanipal's library. They're still working on that collection as we speak. We got through a lot of it, but it's so massive that they're still not done. So maybe there's more discoveries yet to come, which would just be amazing. There's a bust of King Ashurbanipal there on the left. He's out, looks probably on a lion hunt with his staff. And we don't know exactly what that library would look like. We have an artist's conception there on the left of how it may have looked in its heyday. Again, there on the right, you can see some of those tablets. Some of them are quite small, as you guys see, but some of them are pretty good size. There in the British Library. That's one of the most important men, George Smith, who's responsible for a lot of the archaeology there in Nineveh to recover this. You can see part of what he has. In that case, that tablet on the right, you see is part of the flood epic, which you guys know is a big part in many world religions and really, frankly, all over the world, frankly. Obviously, Judeo-Christian, Muslim world, but ancient Syrians had a flood belief, as you guys know, often in the Americas, many places in the world, there's a flood epic. And so this is one of the first we have there on the right. And finally, closer to home, and we're almost done with a short little edition. Over in San Francisco, if you guys are ever downtown, right next to Civic Center, downtown San Francisco, you'll see a modern day reconstruction of King Ashurbanipal. But some scholars have argued that's not maybe exactly how he would look like, but you know what, that's fine, it doesn't matter. It represents King Ashurbanipal. He's holding a lion cub there, and he's holding a tablet. Apparently he's also working out a lot because he is buff. Well, he was a warrior king, so maybe some of that's not all wrong, but in any case, but the significance it is of that great treasury of culture and literacy and the human experience being passed down to us. So in this case, him holding that tablet, whether that sculpture is accurate representation, what he looked like or not, doesn't matter. because that certainly is a truth that his library and the legacy of collected learning go on to influence later civilizations all the way down to you and I. And you see there on the right, that's a modern day Penguin translation, Epic Gilgamesh, of which we have much to thank King Nashopal and that massive library, that treasury of the human experience for that, that we still have these classics and one that you guys get to read a small, very small part of, just a few pages. I'm sure you'll see at least some of that or quite a bit of that on the exam. So I hope you have taken good notes with that. That is the end of the short little edition lecture. All right, guys, we'll see you with the next one. Take care, everybody.